Hello, Jeff Zwarenk here. Welcome to Give and Take, the segment of our show where we explore important scientific ideas to help you be more convinced in the truth of Christianity. And today I'm joined by Dr. Ken Keathley, and we're going to be investigating whether the Bible, in particular Genesis, is just another copy of an ancient Near Eastern religious text. Ken, it's good to have you here today.
Good to be here. Thank you, Jeff.
Always excited to get to talk to someone who's got expertise, not only background in science, but also a good understanding of theology and ancient Near Eastern texts and biblical texts. And so kind of just maybe start us off here. What are the features of ancient Near Eastern texts? Because we're going to be talking about whether Genesis is a copy of one of those that's out there.
Yeah, well, we do recognize that Israel was surrounded by neighbors. There was Babylon on one side, there was Egypt on the other. And then of course, even within the promised land, there were the Canaanites. So there were a lot of other cultures surrounding Israel. And without a doubt, they had a profound influence on the way the people thought in that time. So yeah, just like any other time, they were not isolated, nor were they an island.
So, I mean, it seems almost obvious that would have some influence in going on there. And there are a lot of people who will just claim that the Bible, particularly Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, that those are just copies of other ancient Near Eastern religious texts. Is the Bible just another copy of what was going on at the time?
That's a very strange claim for someone to make. I don't know, reputable scholars who would say that the Bible is simply a copy. I think what it would be a more accurate way to say is that it's very much in conversation with the cultures surrounding it. So what you find is there's a lot of concept, there's a lot of terms, there's a lot of ideas that the biblical authors are interacting with. But that's not the same thing as a copy.
Well, so maybe it's not a copy, but I think the claim I've heard is that the Bible is just plagiarizing from other ancient Near Eastern texts, and therefore it's really nothing special. It's just kind of the latest on the scene, if you will.
Yeah, well, so think of it this way. There were plenty of competing creation myths. There were also other accounts that told about certain significant historical events, such as the flood. The fact that we find Babylonian accounts of the flood, and then we find that there are Hebrew accounts of the flood, doesn't mean that one borrowed from the other. It means more than likely they're talking about the same event. So that seems to be a much more reasonable way to understanding that. I do think, though, that they engaged with one another, that they knew about each other's way of thinking and their writing. So I do think that there's a bit of conversation going on, as I said before.
So if they're both talking about the same things and there's a lot, I mean, the kind of the impression I get from that claim is, that the Bible's just copying is like they really just look pretty similar. They're basically the same. And I know I've talked with you enough to know that when you see the Genesis, particularly Genesis account and like the Enuma Elish, that they appear very different to you. Kind of explore that a little bit with us.
They may be talking about the same things, but they're coming at it from very, very different perspectives. I think that comes through loud and clear. One of the things that one cannot help but notice from the Bible is that there is a significant pushback, if you will, from the biblical authors towards the worldviews of the surrounding cultures. So they're engaging with the same events, they're engaging with the same ideas, but they're arguing very different points of view. Whereas the other competing narratives are presenting a plethora of deities that are constantly at battle. And what we find in the Bible is that there is one sovereign God who is creator of heavens and the earth. The other creation narratives present humans as slaves, beasts of burdens, creatures created to make life easier for the gods. the Bible presents man and woman as being created in God's image, as co-regents with him, and commissioned to have a royal role in creation. So so dealing with a lot of the same things, very different viewpoint.
So if they're dealing with a lot of the same, well, I guess that idea that they have a very different viewpoint, if there's one God as opposed to many gods, if there's humans are important and exceptional rather than being just slaves and servants of the gods, why are there so many of these common elements in there? Why does the Bible look so much like an ancient Near Eastern text?
Well, because that's the time in which it lives. I mean, you think about the conversation we're having right now, that somebody a couple of hundred years from now look back and they'll say they talked like someone at the beginning of the 21st century. Why did they do that? Well, that's the culture in which we live. It's the time in which we live. The figures of speech, the expressions we use, the very questions. I mean, you think about it. You began this program by asking a pertinent question that is relevant today. So why should we be surprised that the Bible addresses the questions of that day? And so it addresses the questions of that day, but it does so in such a way that not only does the answer relate to then, the answer is relevant for all ages.
So one of the things that I find fascinating, and just this idea that Moses talking to his original audience there, it seems like the original audience thinks very differently than we do today. But yet when I read the Genesis account, it reads very much the way I think about things. It's like God did this, and then this happened, and this for this purpose. That's very much the language of today. Is that unique or exceptional?
Yeah, I think what you're getting at, and this is a good point, and that is that the original audience of Genesis thought very much like the people surrounding them. And so what you have in the book of Genesis and the creation account in Genesis 1 and 2 is almost a work of evangelism, because Moses is calling the people to an entirely different way of understanding God, a different way of understanding creation, a different way of understanding their place in the world. And as he does, he presents to them a worldview, as you say, one that has powerfully shaped you and me, because it provides the basis for Western thought. Rather than this being a world made up of a plethora of deities in which reality is fractured into 1,000 different pieces, we believe we're in a universe, that there is one reality of which we live in it. And the way we're able to actually understand it sufficiently. Where did all of these ideas come from? I mean, this is a very Western way of thinking. Well, it comes from the biblical worldview that's presented to us in the opening chapters of Genesis.
Well, thanks, Dr. Keathley. Really appreciate your comments. And, I've heard this claim very often, that Genesis is just a copy or another one of those ancient Near Eastern texts. When you really look into it, what you see is that Moses did such a phenomenal job of contextualizing his message that we think more like Moses than his original audience did. That's really a sign that the Bible is inspired by God for peoples of all time. I'd encourage you to go to YouTube and look for Ken's video on this. It's called Genesis Among Pagans. We'll give you some great insight into other ancient Near Eastern texts and how the Bible really is unique and authoritative and really has something to say that no other text does. Gives you great tools to go out and tell others about who God is, the creator that created you and me and us, and how we can know him.